Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about how the US can't just dominate the climate conference and expect everyone to be happy, while Brazil rolls in with Chinese electric cars. Also, the Chinese representative at the United Nations delivered 3 rounds of strong speeches, no longer holding back and directly criticizing the US. The US has become a country that lies without blinking. They left the Paris Climate Agreement, refused to join international climate conferences, and are exploiting fossil fuels, yet still claim they're effective at protecting the environment. And they even attacked China? At the UN Security Council Open Meeting on Climate and Security on November 6, a war of words broke out between China and the US. In the first speech, China's Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN, Master Jin Shuang, spoke. The main point was that the world must step up efforts to tackle climate change, and the international community should provide enough funding, technology, and capacity-building support to help African countries address it. Developed countries should fulfill their obligations to lead in major emissions reductions, increase climate finance commitments, and enhance technology transfer. At first, it did not seem specifically aimed at the US. But when it was the U.S. representative to the UN Economic and Social Council, Negrea's, turn to speak,
indirectly attacked China, focusing on a permanent member responsible for 26% of global emissions, gaining unfair economic advantage by selectively enforcing environmental rules and manipulating data, causing dangerous air and water pollution. Gang, incensed, responded. The U.S. representative subtly claimed a permanent member emits 26% of global greenhouse gases. Since he was subtle, I'll be subtle too. This member has 1.4 billion people.
Its GDP is second in the world, and its average yearly contribution to global economic growth has been over 30%. The country's per capita carbon emissions are not high globally. As a permanent Security Council member, it has met its emission reduction commitments to the international community, taking strong actions and achieving significant results. It is truly a doer in global climate change response. Let me also point out, perhaps a bit subtly, that there's another example here referring to a certain permanent member, and of course, that's a hint at the United States. He said this country is the largest cumulative emitter of greenhouse gases in history, and its current per capita carbon emissions have always been among the highest in the world. This permanent member of the Security Council has, in fact, reversed course in history by withdrawing from the Paris Agreement twice, seriously undermining global efforts to address climate change. China hopes that the international community can stick to science and cooperation on climate issues, unite and take action together to tackle this severe challenge faced by all of humanity. After listening to Jin Shuang's remarks, the U.S. representative, Ray, requested to speak again. He said, regarding the Chinese representative's comments about the U.S., we can conclude that China's statement, this kind of defensive attitude comes from their deep awareness that they themselves are the world's largest carbon emitter. He also specifically emphasized the U.S.'s efforts in improving the environment. These are effective policies, and they are especially successful in increasing energy production while also reducing pollution even further.
Gang fired back. China is indeed the largest emitter, we don't deny it, but we're also the most resolute, effective nation in climate action.
He emphasized that China is a doer on global climate action. In contrast, he pointed out the U.S. is stepping backward, claiming climate change is the biggest hoax in history, and has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement twice, becoming the main obstacle to global climate cooperation. To sum up, Trump's claim that climate change is the biggest hoax in human history is clearly an anti-scientific mindset. The U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, the cancellation of new energy subsidies domestically, and the renewed focus on fossil fuels, these backward moves have made the U.S. a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, U.S. representatives can still brazenly claim that America is making remarkable progress in improving the environment. They even claim that while increasing energy production, they're effectively reducing pollution. Secondly, the U.S. excels at completely ignoring its own responsibilities, while shamelessly accusing China, openly saying things like China manipulates data, causing air and water pollution to reach dangerous levels. This kind of behavior from the U.S. is truly disgraceful, totally unbefitting of a major power. Thirdly, if we let U.S. representatives go around spreading these blatant lies unchecked. More people will end up believing these lies, making things harder. Fortunately, our expert responded methodically, giving a strong rebuttal. The 30th Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change will be in Brazil from November 10th to 21st. Isn't this also the first time in 30 years that there won't be any senior U.S. representatives attending the United Nations Climate Change Summit? As the world's largest economy and a key geopolitical player, it's quite surprising that the U.S. is skipping such an important international conference. But the funny thing is, for many participating countries, Trump's absence is actually a relief. They're glad there's less chance for him to disrupt the meeting. On November 6th, a delegate from Brazil told Reuters UK that without U.S. officials present, we can actually see that real multilateral dialogue can take place. The New York Times also reported that some observers felt relieved that the U.S. didn't attend the meeting, because they believe Trump is openly hostile to climate issues and has already become an obstacle to international cooperation on global warming. Senator Schatz, a Democrat from Hawaii, said, "I usually think the U.S. should have a seat at the negotiating table. If the U.S. is just going to sit there and drag the negotiations down, then I think it's better not to show up at all." Nursbay also said that the Trump administration not only abandoned America's previous commitments to the world to control greenhouse gas emissions, but also pressured other countries to slow down their efforts to tackle climate change. The U.S., together with other oil-producing countries, opposed the Global Plastics Treaty. They forced Europe to abandon climate legislation and blocked the shipping industry from imposing the first global carbon emissions tax. At the UN General Assembly in September, Trump put on a ridiculous solo act, claiming that if other countries don't break free from this green scam, they'll be heading for failure. Former climate negotiator Toby Anama said he was shocked by how ruthlessly Trump and his cabinet members opposed Europe's climate goals. The opening ceremony of this climate conference was held on November 6th in Belém, Brazil. You might notice that the electric vehicles driving into the venue were BYD cars from China. Stepping out of these eco-friendly vehicles was this year's host of the climate conference, Brazilian President Lula. This stylish black SUV is a car produced by Chinese automaker BYD, and it's one of a fleet of electric and hybrid vehicles specially prepared for the conference, used for transportation. Some delegates attending the summit believe that Brazil's choice to use Chinese electric vehicles as the official transportation for Lula and other national leaders sends a clear signal to the Chinese. It shows that, in the process of transforming development and economic progress, the largest country in Latin America is turning its attention to China, especially against the backdrop of the Trump administration withdrawing from the climate conference. If Brazil's move highlights the significant achievements of Chinese green technology in the country, Scott Kennedy, a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said that even without the political and technological leadership of the United States, the world will continue to move forward. Brazil's choice of these Chinese electric vehicles shows that it still has other options. Sometimes, electric vehicles are regarded by environmentalists as one of the key solutions to climate change, because they reduce the world's reliance on fossil fuels and eliminate carbon dioxide, which is a major greenhouse gas. This was mentioned in the opening speech that day. Let me put it this way: we need to adopt a new way of life, a fairer and lower carbon development path. China is the world's sixth largest electric vehicle market, and in Brazil, over 80% of electric vehicles are from Chinese brands. BYD, for example, has built many factories in Brazil. Last month, Brazilian President Lula celebrated BYD's 10 millionth new energy vehicle. At the ceremony, he was so moved he shed tears during his speech. Lula said that when he was born in that land, many children there suffered from hunger and didn't even have enough to nap at noon. He himself only tasted bread for the first time when he was 7, after arriving in the big city of Sao Paulo. He said, "Don't forget what that tasted like. I'm a person from Pernambuco." But what kind of place is that? Pernambuco used to be the richest region in Brazil, of course. That used to be refers to 400 years ago, when the area was constantly exploited by Western colonizers, especially the Portuguese. Here, millions of Brazilwood trees were cut down and turned into relics. In the Amazon rainforest, sugarcane grew fiercely, and this place became a major producer in South America. During the sugarcane era, Brazil almost monopolized the global sugar market. But this prosperity only lasted until the end of the 17th century. Just like the gold boom 100 years later and the coffee boom 200 years after that, the wealth of this Brazilian land always carried a curse. Every 8 years, Brazil manages to create world-shaking wealth. But all of it was taken away by colonizers. Now, China is coming in to invest and develop local industries. Take BYD in Brazil's northeast Bahia as an example. It's their largest factory outside Asia, and this plant originally belonged to Ford. On October 9th, Brazil's President Lula showed up at the factory to give a speech welcoming BYD's arrival. He said BYD's investment proves that industrialization and sustainability can go hand in hand. He joked that God writes with crooked lines. He made Ford leave Brazil and let BYD come here, which is a great replacement for us, because BYD brings the most important technology in the global automotive industry. Lula said that through this factory, Brazil is showing the world its blueprint for national development. Brazil doesn't take sides with any country, but hopes to build civilized relations with the world. This factory will restore the dignity of the people of Kamakari, improve their lives, and let them hold their heads high. They can walk tall out on the streets. This story tells us two things. First, China's development of the new energy industry not only benefits the environment, but also creates win-win opportunities with other developing countries. Second, taking Brazil as an example, China is investing in and developing the local area, but the US slapped a 50% tariff on Brazil, so isn't it obvious who's taking away the bread from Brazilians?